Ania here, and what we're going to be doing today is going over the study guide very briefly, and basically how this is going to go is if you remember the sheet that I gave you guys, well, not the sheet, but the assignment that I gave you where it had half of the study guide with the terms and the other half it did not have the terms on the other side. It's listed as right here before video, and then on the other side it was after video. On the after video side, you guys are going to be filling out any of the missing sections that you have. So if you've got it correctly on the side that you've already filled out, so if you've already filled out this current side, then what you're going to do is you're going to copy this into the other section and then fill out all the correct things that you learned from this video and then resubmit it to me. All right. So I'm just going to go through, and if you already got it and you know it, just go on and just don't bother about that part of the video. But if you understand it and you're good, then you can just go ahead and, um, fill it in as such. So to get started, simple carbohydrates, these are ones that are very easy to break down, very simple to break down. They do not have a very adverse effect on your blood sugar, which means they don't really have a large glycemic index. And then you also get this from like fruits and vegetables and things like that. Complex carbs are things like potatoes and bread, and they tend to have a larger glycemic index and can really spike your blood sugar. So, if as you just saw, I mentioned simple and complex carbs, they do affect your blood sugar in different ways. Simple obviously doesn't really shoot it up very quickly, and then complex obviously um, can have larger effects on it. But the big thing to understand is that simple carbohydrates are associated with a lower glycemic index, and complex carbs are associated with a higher glycemic index. So one of the big things that a lot of people want to know about is cutting out carbs. And if you think about it, the word carbohydrate, the key word is hydrate. So if you cut out carbohydrate, you are essentially going to be cutting out a lot of water, meaning that you are going to have a lot of water weight, a lot of water loss if you begin to cut out carbs. Now, moving on with fiber, what fiber basically is fiber is a carbohydrate. That is one of the things that a lot of people get confused. Fiber is a carbohydrate, all right? It is indigestible, which means we cannot digest it, but it helps a lot in the digestion process. So we need to make sure that we consume a lot of it. But you need to know that fiber is a carbohydrate and that, we do need to consume it. And so moving on, another thing that we have is the types of macronutrients. Now, you hear a lot about people talking that go on diets. They talk about, oh, I need to calculate my macros, this and that. Your macronutrients are the three big nutrients, all right? They are your fats, your carbohydrates, and your protein. So whenever you hear about macronutrients, fats, carbohydrates, and protein. Now, we also have insulin. Now, insulin is a hormone that regulates blood sugar. So, whenever you start consuming things with a lot of sugar in it and a lot of carbohydrates in it, your body is going to produce a lot of insulin to try to bring it down. So, one of the big things that you want to make sure that you understand is that insulin is that hormone that helps regulate blood sugar. Because remember, if we have too much sugar in our blood, it's not very healthy. So, insulin's going to help regulate that. Next, we have fructose and glucose. Fructose basically means it is fruit sugar, all right? So it's the really sweet stuff. So when you eat a really sweet apple, when you get honey, from the bees and whatnot, or for example, you drink a soda, it contains high fructose corn syrup, you have a lot of fructose in those types of things. So honey, soda, fruit. And so that's going to be very quick sugar. Then you have what's called glucose, which comes from like bread and things of that nature, that are basically broken down as sugar from carbohydrates that are not fruits. So next we have the three types of proteins. So we're moving away from carbs and we're moving into proteins. So next we have our three types of proteins, which are your complete, your incomplete, and your complementary. So your complete proteins are the proteins that basically contain all the essential amino acids that are there for you and can help with muscle stimulation, muscle growth, and things of that nature. So complete proteins. Essentially, if you have meat, meat and eggs, those are very, very good complete proteins. You can get a lot of your essential amino um, acids from eating like things like meat and eggs. They contain everything. Then you have the incomplete protein, which means they may contain some amino acids. So, for example, this might be like beans and peas and things of that nature. So they're incomplete. Not a lot of proteins have it, but um, they don't have a lot of the amino acids, but they have some of it there. And then you have what's called your complementary proteins, which is they are essentially where you take different types of proteins and you put them together. So you might eat tofu and then you may eat beans and then you eat both of those together and that's going to give you, all of the amino acids that you need. But complementary proteins are where you take two separate incomplete proteins to sort of make a complete protein. Another big thing to understand is the perfect protein. What the perfect protein means is that it is basically containing all essential amino acids as well as, it's just a very good source. The example, then egg. An egg is considered to be the standard of the perfect protein. So next we have amino acids. What these are these are the building blocks of protein. All right. So in order to get protein in your muscles and make sure that they grow, you need to have a lot of amino acids. So you want to make sure that you consume these quote unquote building blocks of protein. And speaking of that, how do muscles grow? Essentially, what happens is when you exercise, you create what are called micro tears, not micro tears, but micro tears in the muscle. And then what happens is the amino acids and the protein go in there, and then they start the rebuilding process to rebuild it bigger, better, faster, stronger. And then continuing with that, we have skeletal muscles, which is part of what this test is about. So skeletal muscles, just so you really need to know, these are the muscles that you think of when you think about working out. So they're the ones that are attached to the skeleton and allow for it to move. So for example, your biceps, your triceps, your quads, your traps, all that is considered skeletal muscles. All right. So moving on. So the results of eating excess protein, carbs, or fat, essentially, you're going to get fat. All right. If you consume too much of one particular macronutrient, it could be very, very dangerous from the standpoint of eventually your body will need it for energy. It may start beginning to break it down and store it as energy. So there are people who eat too much fat or too much protein or in many cases too many carbs. And because they eat so much in excess of those types um, of those types of macronutrients, it can be very, very detrimental in that sense. So it's important to eat well balanced and making sure that if you have to cut out a certain macronutrient for whatever reason, whether it's to gain or maintain or lose weight, that you're still making sure that you're being balanced enough in your meals when you eat. Now, mono and polyunsaturated fat, these are the types of fats that when you eat them, typically they're considered the good fat. And then also, it's very understandable that many of these, especially if you find them, like for example, as oils, you'll find them and they can actually be considered to be oils at room temperature, can also solidify when they are chilled. So that's one of the big things that you need to know. Saturated fat is often associated with meat. So if you see things like steak, burgers, chicken, that kind of stuff, lots of saturated animal fat is going to be linked with protein. Next, we have trans fat. Trans fat is obviously the bad stuff. It provides the fluffiness in cakes. It gives the chips the crunch. It gives, all that good deliciousness. But, it's considered to be what is known as a partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. Remember, we started cooking with that for a while. Government came in, shut it down. So now there's actually a large ban on trans fats. in our nation. Most people do not use them, and if they are used, for example, in like breads or, for example, cakes or things like that, it's very, very, very small quantities. Next, we have omega-3 fatty acids and where they're found. Essentially, what you need to know about omega-3 fatty acids and where they're found is that they are mainly found in fish and plants. Okay, so if anybody ever says that you need, omega-3 fatty acids, make sure that you're looking at certain types of leafy greens, and then also making sure that you're looking at certain types of nuts and also fish, tuna in particular. Very, very good. Next, we have vitamins and minerals. And the big thing that you need to understand with vitamins and minerals is that vitamins typically have a letter associated with it. Vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin B12, vitamin K, vitamin E, vitamin D, they all have a letter associated with it. Minerals, on the other hand, are going to be more associated with the periodic table. So you could look online or you could look at the periodic table of elements. You more than likely will find a mineral in there. So for example, if I looked up the periodic name for calcium, obviously it's going to come up as Ca or C. I think that's it. But yeah, if you can think about it, about being on the periodic table of elements, it is a mineral. And if you can think about it being, for example, um, as like a letter, then it's considered more of a vitamin. All right, macro minerals and micro minerals. Remember, micro minerals, if you think of something, if you're trying to trace a picture, you're trying to get every little detail when you trace something. So trace minerals are micro minerals because micro means small. So if you're trying to get really small, you want to make sure that you have that trace mineral. Then you have macro. Macro is considered to be big. Remember how I said that our macro minerals are considered to be big. Our macronutrients are big. Macroeconomics are big, large economics. What you're looking at with macro minerals are known as bulk. So if you're thinking about someone that's big, like Dwayne the Rock Johnson, he is a bulky guy. So macro minerals are bulk. The other thing that you need to know is solubility, which is how vitamins are taken in, and we're going to talk about that very briefly in review. So, how vitamins are taken in the body are known as solubility. Macronutrients, once again, I already reviewed those. Macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and then you have your micronutrients, which are your vitamins and your minerals. Some people would also say water, but we're not going to get too crazy about that. All right, next we have essential vitamins and non essential vitamins. All right, this gets people really confused, so you want to make sure that you pay attention. Essential vitamins means that we cannot make it by the body. We cannot make it in our body, and we have to get it from external food sources. So, for example, if you can't get enough, make it in the body vitamin C, let's just throw that one out there, then what you would have to do is you would have to make sure that you go ahead and you eat some oranges and eat some citrus fruit foods to get that vitamin. Another thing is we have non-essential vitamins, which is we can make it in the body. For example, you hear about people talking about like go outside, go out in the sun and get you some vitamin D. That's what they mean. When you're out there and you're in the sunlight getting that fresh air, it actually stimulates vitamin D production in your body. So in that case, we can synthesize that vitamin within the body. Next, we have fat soluble vitamins, which basically means that the body is, when the vitamin is taken in by the body, it is taken in through the fatty tissues within the body and it's held within those fatty tissues. And the other part of that also is you have water soluble, which means that, we take it in through the water and then we can pee it out. That's pretty much how it works. Now, just so you know, we have vitamin toxicity, which means that if we have a toxicity of vitamins, That means we have too much vitamin type in the body, and it's going to make us sick. Just so you know, a vitamin toxicity mostly happens with fat soluble vitamins because in excess of fat soluble vitamins the body cannot readily get rid of like water because it's held in the body by those fatty tissues, and so since it's being held in that body it is very hard to get rid of it, and therefore you run the risk of, for example, having a vitamin toxicity. Another thing that we run into is vitamin deficiency. On the flip side, one of the vitamins that people can tend to be very deficient in is very deficient in is, for example, water soluble vitamins, because, for example, we're constantly urinating out in excess of those vitamins. And so, since we constantly urinate out in excess that we don't use, if in the event that we happen to be deficient in it, because we have constantly gotten rid of that excess that we don't use, and then when it comes time to use them and we don't have them, then that would lead to, once again, the deficiency. So once again, water soluble are more likely to be deficient, and then vitamin toxicity, those are going to be more fat soluble. And that right there is all we have at the moment. So you can go ahead and go through the process of going through and copying over to the side of all the stuff that you've learned or that you've picked up from this recording. What's going to happen is you're going to submit this back to me, and obviously if I see that you got the left and the right side filled out, I'm going to go ahead and then send you over to get the 100. Just to let you guys know, you guys will have a test. A day, Thursday. B day will be obviously on Friday. You will have a practice test to go with this because this is a very big, important test. So you will have a practice test that goes with this. So make sure that you're taking time to check over this study guide. We'll go through the practice test when that gets issued later on in the week, and we will continue to make things happen. But that is all I have. So you guys have a good rest of the day. Get that submitted, and I will see you guys Thursday.